Oh, yeah, we need to emulate.
Yeah, it's just a bit of a fight.
Oh, yeah, no, it's just that. Yep.
Alright, welcome everyone to the grand final of Joynt 2020. Let's have a quick round of applause for A1 and B1. Awesome. The motion of the grand final is what you can see up on the screen above us, the motion about public health officials and COVID response. Without any further ado, is there anything else I'd like to say? No, let's get underway then. So I'll welcome up the first speaker of the affirming team. That's the bell.
Fundamental truth at the start of this debate is that on both sides of this debate, the fundamental response and the immediate response that New Zealand takes to COVID is primarily political. The government is the one that decides the majority of the policy decisions that dictate the shape of New Zealand's response to COVID. So what this debate is about is not necessarily about the initial policy directions that are taken, but over whether it is better to have politicians front up for the decisions that politicians primarily have made, or whether it is better to put someone who is an expert and part of the public service in front. So that's the debate we're having today. Firstly, I'm going to walk you through what it is that we support, and then I'm going to go through 2 points of substantive. The first of those is about the capacity for deflected responsibility. That means that politicians have a lessened degree of accountability of the decisions that they make. And secondly, I'm going to talk about impartiality and the quality of advice within the public service, why that is harmed, and in the long term, why that can be extremely damaging to New Zealand. Firstly then, what do we support? Basically, we still think there is some role potentially for officials to play in the briefings. For example, there are lots of public servants other than Ashley Bloomfield who sometimes turn up in the briefings when there are particularly technical things related specifically to their job and their decisions made under statutory authority, that they are the ones that they need to explain. But what we don't support is basically what's been taking place under the Labour government, which is just Ashley Bloomfield emceeing a big meeting where everyone hoorahs about how great the Labour Party is. Our goals in this debate are a few things. We want quality of response. We don't want people to die. We would prefer a scenario in which we are, to the best of our ability, to save the New Zealand economy. But on top of that, we also want accountability for politicians for the decisions that they made in order for the ongoing health of New Zealand's democracy to be upheld. Let's talk firstly then about deflected responsibility. And the first thing I want to talk about right at the top of this point is, what does a good response look like? Yes, a good response to COVID is quick, it's effective, it does its job, but it's also the case that the response to COVID changes over time. It is a situation that is constantly in flux, although I guess now we're out the other side, it's kind of the other way, we're kind of looking back in time here. But what we say in this debate is that the government needs accountability mechanisms in order to make sure that things go as well as they can. Because a lot of the decisions that are made are political decisions made by politicians, we need some degree of accountability to make sure that those politicians are doing the best job, making the best decisions, and therefore saving the most lives, saving the most jobs, etc. A couple of reasons why why politicians are less accountable in the decisions that they make in the circumstance where a public servant takes a stand and is the one that fronts up. First of those reasons, an important component of just democratic accountability in general is making politicians face up to hard questions. When a politician has to stand up, no thank you, Shah, when a politician has to stand up and explain a decision that they made and is unable to, that is an extreme public embarrassment that reflects poorly on them. There is a strong personal incentive for them, therefore, to make sure that they have all of the information that they need to make decisions at all times, to make sure that they are backing up everything that they are doing, that they are seeking the highest quality of advice possible. But beyond that personal incentive, there is also incentive in terms of party politics to make sure that you don't have anyone like a David Clark figure getting egg on their face all of the time, because that looks very bad for the party. So there are strong norms within the political parties themselves that mean that the ministers always keep themselves maximally up to date. Therefore, when ministers are under scrutiny and feel under scrutiny, they make sure that they are on the ball all the time. Given that they are making decisions, if we are able to prove in this debate that they are making sure they have the best advice possible and making sure they are up to date with things as best as they can, that is a significant benefit. Secondly, as I explained at the top of this speech, the government ultimately will do what it wants. These are political decisions that are made, but in the circumstance where you have a public servant who is standing up there and becomes the face of the response, people associate that person with that response. They attribute some sort of responsibility for the response to that person. But on top of that, there are circumstances in which the politicians themselves actively promote that by saying that their hands are tied by the experts who are making the decisions behind the scenes. It's not true that the politicians' hands are tied and the decisions are all made by experts behind the scenes. So we prefer a system in which the government is forced to take full responsibility for the decisions that it makes, rather than being able to palm those decisions off to other people and therefore avoid political consequences for potential mistakes that they made. What does it mean when we have politicians standing up, having some degree of accountability? Or actually, what does it mean when we don't offer them that accountability? Firstly, it allows for soft responses. It is a good political decision to go in soft on COVID and to blame the scientists and blame Ashley Bloomfield and those sorts of people for being the reason why you had to do that, because your hands were tied by the civil service. That is a good political decision because you're able to save constituents and you make a little gamble with people's lives effectively to save a few more jobs or whatever, to make sure that people are happy with you, because if you go in hard and early, people get angry at you for all the jobs go, whatever. So it's better for you to make a soft response, and if it goes wrong, just blame it on someone else. That means people lose their lives. Secondly though, it ensures personal effort from politicians. David Clark probably wouldn't go mountain biking or wouldn't go to the beach if Ashley Bloomfield had not been there. Thirdly, you don't get short-term accountability for those politicians. David Clark ought to have been sacked almost immediately after the COVID response took place because he was fundamentally incompetent. But he stuck around for a very, very long time, and people lost their lives as a result of that because there was an accountability palm off to the public service. I'll take you in a moment. Incompetent politicians make decisions that affect people's lives. They should be subject to short-term accountability that forces them to be sacked for the sake of for the sake of party politics. Overall, the response to COVID is better, faster, more accurate, and more likely to change to changing circumstances in the situation where you have a high degree of accountability. I'll take a PY.
Sam, public health officials almost always advocated for a harsher response, not a softer response. Why doesn't this then give governments cover to implement that harder response to save lives?
So what I'm going to explain is that it's very difficult for the public service to go back on itself or to disagree with the line that the government wants to push when they're forced to be the public face. So sorry to be here's the next part of my speech, but this is going to directly respond to that POI. Impartial advice is important to the government because experts know what needs to be done, but also experts have to advise many governments after them, and they have a substantial amount of influence over the policies that future governments take. Note, most of the things that public servants do, like their usual anonymity, the fact that they're apolitical, those sorts of things, rely on strong conventions that we think that we ought to protect. First problem when you have someone stand up from the public service. It is very difficult to criticise the decision that is made by the government. For a couple of reasons. Firstly, when you have Ashley Bloomfield stand up and say, do this is the policy we have adopted, that is an expert endorsement of the decision that the politicians have decided to take. You have Ashley Bloomfield, who is an expert, saying, we have to do this thing. But it is not necessarily because he has made that decision or because he as an expert believes that it's the right thing to do, but because it is his job now, apparently, just to stand there and say to do the things that the Labour government wants you to do. But on top of that, it's extraordinarily difficult to simultaneously tell someone to do something and then to then go backtrack on that when the situation changes. And this is where we get response to that POI. There are personal incentives that prevent Ashley Bloomfield from going back on something that he said a week ago, because it looks very bad for him, because it looks very bad for the ministry that he fronts, and so there are internal incentives there that cause ministries, cause Ashley Bloomfield personally to be biased towards sticking with the status quo rather than showing that they made a mistake in the past and showing that something else needed to be done. Ultimately, Ashley Bloomfield has become a political figure in New Zealand. He has saved the Labour Party from a significant degree of embarrassment. People lost their lives to COVID in New Zealand. We think that might not have happened under a more competent system.